Good evening. I call this meeting of the Job Growth, Energy, Affordability, Policy, and Finance Committee to order. Today is Monday, April 16th. Oh, the minutes from this afternoon are already done? Wow, impressive. Representative Thiessen moves approval of the minutes from earlier today. Is there any corrections, changes, or additions? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Motion prevails. Members, so before we start tonight, just the chair would kind of like to just lay out where we see things going this evening. First of all, Representative O'Neill will be moving House File 3708 for possible inclusion in a later bill. It is my intent that we will have 40 minutes to hear from supporters, up to 40 minutes from supporters of the bill. Then we'll hear for up to 40 minutes from those with concerns or are in opposition to the bill. And then we'll have members' questions and comments. So members, just to be clear, what we have in front of us is a nuclear power bill, which in and of itself is complicated. On top of that, we have just candidly divisions in the business community, divisions in the labor community, divisions in the environmental community. It's one of these committees where the chair has brought this with them. So if you just give me a second here. All right, so everything will be okay. Things will be fine. Yeah, it's water, relax. I can hear Republican staff in the corner screaming right now. So obviously this is a very complicated, it's a contentious issue. We're laying it over this evening. But for members of the committee, I think this is a great opportunity to listen and learn. Because it is a very complicated issue, not only in Minnesota, but nationwide. And Representative O'Neill, I want to thank you for carrying this bill. So with that, Representative O'Neill moves House File 3708 for possible inclusion in a later bill. And Representative O'Neill, my understanding is the DE1 amendment is your amendment.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so that amendment will conform to. All right, so discussion on the DE1 amendment to get the bill in the form the author would like. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Motion prevails. The DE1 amendment is adopted. Representative O'Neill, you got 40 minutes starting now. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. So the DE1 actually adds more robustness to the bill. It was some things that the other body would like, and I found some other things that I would like, and so we did some language tightening. What this bill does at a high level is offer regulatory certainty to Xcel Energy, who has 3 nuclear power plants, 1 in Monticello and 2 reactors in Red Wing. What this bill does is it gives them a look before they spend expenditures, so they can bring a proposal to the PUC, they can lay out their entire plan. With this amendment, now they can go back and forth with the PUC to modify, to accept, or to decline the proposal. So they can go back and forth. There's a large amount of public input and public testimony in this process. Once they finally come to an agreement for this proposal, then they can move forward and be able to go ahead and spend according to the proposal. And that is what the bill does, because right now, what they have to do is they have to spend all the money on their nuclear plants in hopes that they are found, each expenditure is found prudent. And of course, they're not always found prudent, which is what the rate case is always about. And it would be more cost-effective and financially responsible for them to have this conversation with the PUC before they actually spend the money. And that is what the bill does. The language that I did tighten up, I just would like to point out, there was an inconsistency from the drafting. And this may get to why there is a gentleman outside the door with a blank check. There is, in the language on the front page, on page 1, it says on line 1.13, total expected costs, and the word expected costs is seen throughout the bill. It was not in paragraph D, line 2.19 through 2.13 in the original bill, and I inserted it so that we are talking about the expected costs, the costs that were agreed upon in the proposal, and that is what they would be, that would be found prudent. So, Chair and members, that is what this bill does. And I'd like to turn it over to my testifier, Rick Evans from Xcel Energy.
Welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record and proceed with testimony.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I'm Rick Evans with Xcel Energy. As the chair pointed out, this can sometimes be a complicated issue, and so I want to take just a little bit of a step back and walk through the process that we are starting in on today with respect to these nuclear plants, and then walk into the process that we propose under this new legislation. So in February of 2019, we will file a resource plan, an integrated resource plan. This is a 15-year forward look at the resources that we think we will need to serve our customers for the next 15 years. This is a filing with the Public Utilities Commission. The public and any interested parties can intervene and participate in the process. It takes a fair amount of time to go through this, but this is the process where decisions will be made about what resources Xcel Energy should be planning on for the next 15 years. It's important to note that nothing in the bill today in HF 3708 changes that process at all. The decision about whether the nuclear plants will continue to run through the end of their license will be made in the resource plan, not in any way changed by this bill. And the decision will be made by the Public Utilities Commission in the resource plan. We are going to come into the resource plan asking that we be allowed to continue to operate the nuclear plants through at least their current licenses. With Monticello, that's 2030. With Prairie Island 1 and 2, it's 2033 and 2034. The reason we want to do that is because we have been challenged by our CEO to achieve a resource plan that gets us to 85% carbon-free energy by 2030 while keeping the rate of growth of our bills below the rate of inflation. And that's a challenge that we think requires us to operate the nuclear plants through the end of their license. But at the end of the day, the decision about what plants operate and what plants don't operate will be made by the Public Utilities Commission in the integrated resource plan. There's strong reasons besides the 85 by 30 goal that we put out there to operate the plants. We think it's cost effective for our customers. We think it's a cost effective bridge to whatever new technologies we'll be developing. It gives us time to start building those technologies into our thinking as a utility. Not to mention the fact that there are literally hundreds of family supporting jobs in these plants located in the communities of Monticello and Red Wing and the area around that. And they're a strong economic presence, and I think you're going to have some testifiers later that testify to that. So we think there's strong reasons to keep these plants operating through the end of their license. But again, that decision will be made in the integrated resource plan by the Public Utilities Commission. And this bill, HF 3708, does not change that process. Assuming that the nuclear plants are included in the plan that comes out of the resource planning process, we will have to determine what costs and investments we're going to need to make in those plants to keep them operating through that period of time. I wish Representative Dabney were here because he mentioned last Friday the Monticello plant, and I think this gives us a good example. He said we got to our rate case, and suddenly it turned out that the Monticello plant had, as I think characterized it, enormous cost overruns. I'll quibble with that term overrun because an overrun assumes that you had some sort of budget you were starting with and that you somehow exceeded that. The fact is we didn't. We had very broad parameters of expectations of cost, but the PUC and the interveners in the Monticello case were surprised by the size of the costs because there was no baseline against which to measure it. And that creates uncertainty not only for us, but also for the Public Utilities Commission and for our customers. And so what HF 3708 is intended to do is to remedy that problem. What it seeks to do, as Representative O'Neill said, is really only one thing. Keep in mind that when a rate case comes along under the current system, the Public Utilities Commission will make a decision about whether the investments and costs that we have incurred were prudent. At that point, the costs have already been incurred, the investments have already been made, and the Public Utilities Commission will determine whether they are prudent. And of course, if they're surprised as they were in the Monticello case, this creates a problem. What we're proposing is that the prudency decision be made earlier in the process. And that's all this bill does, is to move the prudency decision earlier in the process, so that we would come in before we spend the money, before we invest the money, and lay out a very detailed budget. and talk about what the impact of that budget would be on rates, if you read the language of the bill. And all of the interveners, the public members, anyone else who wants to come in and talk about whether this is the appropriate budget or not is perfectly free to do that. And we'll have that examination before we actually go out and spend the money. We create essentially an agreement. We come to an agreement or a conclusion, assuming the PUC is willing to grant our budget as a prudent decision. We'll come to an agreement before we go spend the money about what prudent expenditures are for this plant. It's perhaps an oversimplified example, but if you hire someone to improve your home, you don't say, well, here's the work I want you to do. When you're all done, come and tell me how much it costs, and I'll decide if I want to pay you. Instead, you come to an agreement in advance about how much it's going to cost to fix up your home or to do the remodeling you want to do, and then you hold the contractor to the amount that he or she has given you, and that's essentially the process that we're looking for here. We think this actually increases the safety and confidence of our customers because it's a very transparent process. We not only bring in the budget in advance that they can look over and examine and criticize and comment on and argue before the PUC, but every 2 years thereafter under the delete all amendment, we come in and every 2 years and say, well, here's how we're doing. This is the progress we're making. And if you notice at the very bottom of the last sentence of the bill, really, in paragraph E there, it says the commission may issue orders it deems necessary to ensure that the carbon reduction facility remains cost effective for customers and financially viable for the utility. So the Public Utilities Commission, as we go through this process, is able to look and make sure that they're protecting customers as we go. In essence, the budget that we file and that hopefully is approved by the Public Utilities Commission becomes a cap. It becomes a cap under which we will have to manage. If we exceed that cap, then we're on the hook for that money. That's our risk, that we've exceeded the cap that we've agreed to in advance. By the way, if we come in under the cap, under this bill, we don't get to recover the budget. We only get to recover what we've actually spent. And so, unlike some other states where we've seen sometimes nuclear plants looking for subsidies or extra breaks in terms of cost recovery and that sort of thing, that's not what we're asking for here. We're asking to establish a budget and then allow us to manage under that budget. And the return for us is that if we are able to manage within that budget when we come back in for our rate case, as long as we have been under the amount that has been found to be prudent, they can't come in and disallow any of those costs as imprudent in a backwards look at what we've done. And that's what we get in terms of being able to have some certainty going forward that when we make these investments, the investments are something we're doing in partnership with our regulator. I'll close just by pointing out a couple of things that the bill is not. The bill is not a blank check. The amount written on the check will be written by the Public Utilities Commission. First, in the prudency review, the advanced determination of prudence, and at the end of the day, in the rate case. We do not get to spend more, well, anything we spend over what's already been deemed prudent is our risk. And so the blank check simply doesn't exist. The check will be written for the amount that we actually spend as long as it stays under the budget. This is no subsidy. We get to recover only the expenses that we actually incur as long, again, as they are under the budget that we've proposed. This does not sidestep the resource plan. The resource plan process will decide how long these plants are going to stay open, the same way they do under current law after this law is passed. It does not change the PUC ability to determine prudence. It simply moves that ability to the front of the process before the money is spent, rather than a second-guessing, backward-looking process after the money is spent. And finally, it does not change the public or intervener input into the process. Every step of the way, this is an open process with open filings, public meetings, public hearings, and the opportunity for anyone who wants to intervene to come in and offer their position on the issues. So we believe this is a way to help create transparency and certainty It's a way to help us make decisions about the smart way to go forward with the nuclear plants in our effort to keep them open through the end of their current license. We think this is good for, frankly, obviously for Xcel Energy, but we think it's good for our customers. We think it's good for the communities where these plants are. We think it's good for our employees who work at these plants. And I would appreciate your support for the bill. I'd be happy to answer questions, which probably will occur later.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Who's your next testifier, Representative O'Neill?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like Derek Vetch to come from Wright County. He's one of our county commissioners.
Good evening. Welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony. And Representative O'Neill, I'm going to let you kind of police your time for the supporters, okay?
Mr. Chair and fellow respected members of the committee, my name is Derek Vetch. I am Wright County Commissioner of District 2. I represent the areas of Clearwater, Clearwater Township, Silver Creek Township, City of Maple Lake, Maple Lake Township, City of Monticello, and Monticello Township. In Wright County, we are very concerned over the future of the contributing business, the Monticello, or the Xcel nuclear generating plant in Monticello. This plant is a key source of tax revenue, business revenue, and employment to hundreds of citizens around the county. The Xcel nuclear generating plant is the single largest tax contributing entity in Wright County. They annually contribute $7.2 million of the county's $126 million annual budget, which equates to about 6% of the county's budget. A partial or total loss of this revenue would create a massive shift in tax capacity to the 134,000 residents of Wright County. To illustrate this, an average house around Wright County is around $250,000 tax assessed value. Taking that $250,000 tax assessed value, which currently pays about $2,600 in property taxes, removing the nuclear generating plant from the equation, that tax capacity shift would balloon that same $250,000 home's tax payment to $4,428. That's a substantial move that many citizens around our county could not afford to absorb. We understand that the future of this business is unclear, and we are working hard to close our financial reliance on this entity before its scheduled relicensure in 2030. We need the full time to be able to close that gap. On April 10th, the Wright County Board of Commissioners passed a resolution supporting House File 3708. With that resolution, I'm here today to ask members of this committee to aid Xcel in meeting its goal of remaining operational through 2030 with support of House File 3708.
Thank you. Next testifier, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I believe they're handing out the resolution from Wright County. The next testifier is Jeff O'Neill and Marshall Hallock. Jeff O'Neill is the city administrator for the city of Monticello, and Marshall is from Red Wing City Council.
Welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record and proceed with testimony.
Right.
Good evening. My name is Jeff O'Neill. I'm the city administrator for the city of Monticello.
Any relation?
No, Mr. Chair,
sorry.
although we're asked often.
Yeah,
Please continue.
we have the same gift of gab, I guess, but that's about it. I'm here tonight because the legislation being considered could influence the financial viability of nuclear power in Minnesota, which would have a significant impact on Monticello. Operation of the Monticello nuclear plant through the end of the current licensure is critical to the city. Initially, it's essential to understand the context in which the city of Monticello approaches the issue. For the past 50 years, Monticello has accepted the responsibility and the risk of hosting a nuclear facility, including the additional risk of becoming a nuclear waste repository when the federal government failed to find a suitable site. However, we've accepted those risks and responsibilities because of the positive impact on the city by the facility. Nuclear power offers a carbon-free source of baseload energy and reduces Minnesota's dependence on fossil fuels. The plant creates jobs, helps drive the local economy, and the employees are engaged within the community. In addition to these factors, the financial impact of the nuclear plant is vital to Monticello. Our elected officials have worked to control the city's reliance on nuclear power plant, but the reality is that the presence of the plant is inextricably influences the city's finances. Due to the plant's sizable tax contribution, the city does not receive local government aid, and while the city's budget incorporates other types of revenue, those other revenues are not nearly enough to fully balance the financial impact of the Excel facility. Still, the nuclear power plant will be decommissioned one day. We're aware of that, and we're planning for the day when the tax base shifts considerably. However, we also face the financial responsibilities of a growing community. We take responsible stewardship of public funds very seriously as we balance our expanding infrastructure needs with the necessity of diversifying our revenue sources before the plant closes. Through careful fiscal management by our staff and elected officials, our debt service and capital improvement plans incorporate the potential closure of the plant at the end of its current license, but not before. The timeline for the 2030 allows us to project revenues necessary to fund existing debt service payments. That timeline allows us to complete projects associated with the growth of Monticello, including expansion of the fire station, construction of a new public works facility, and completion of additional sanitary sewer infrastructure. The 2030 timeline also allows us to responsibly incorporate additional revenue sources to complement property taxes so the city can continue to reliably provide essential services. And also, the timeline allows us to effectively plan for potential impacts on the local economy so Monticello remains competitive in the region. So given the requisite amount of time associated with the current licensure, the city of Monticello can successfully transition to a fiscal model which no longer includes the nuclear generating plant. However, if the nuclear facility decommissioned sooner, such an event would severely impact the level and quality services provided to our residents, business, and visitors. So with that, I conclude my testimony.
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill. Welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record. And are you related to Representative O'Neill?
I am not. But,
Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
all right, Chair Garofalo, members of the committee, my name is Marshall Hellock. I'm Red Wing's Administrative Business Director, and I'm here to testify on behalf of the City of Red Wing. As Mr. Evans informed the committee, Excel's Prairie Island Nuclear Generating Plant, 2 units, is located in Red Wing, and Excel is an important partner to the city. The city therefore thanks you for the opportunity to testify in support of the plant. We also extend our thanks to you. First and foremost, Red Wing is present today as we have a long record of supporting Excel and the Prairie Island Nuclear Generating Plant. Because as my colleague said, it's critical to our community that the Prairie Island Nuclear Generating Plant operate at least through its current operating license periods. Red Wing and the region have benefited immensely from hosting the nuclear power plant. The plant supports jobs, jobs, jobs. It provides over 600 full-time, good, high-paid, family-supporting, skilled jobs. Additionally, the plant provides over an additional 1,000 jobs during scheduled refueling outages. The plant supports a thriving regional economy. The importance of the jobs and these spillover economic effects cannot be overstated. The plant's also a significant component of the community's property tax base. It currently represents 55% of Red Wing's property tax base and a significant portion of Goodhue County's and Independent School District's 256's tax capacity. The plant also supports numerous and important philanthropic interests in the community. Minnesota has also benefited greatly by our community's willingness to host these facilities. These power plants produce carbon-free, cheaply and reliably, and have made Minnesota a more competitive place to do business. The city supports the concept of long-term shared certainty intrinsic in House File 3708. The bill provides additional regulatory certainty which may assist in ensuring that the plant operates at least through its current licensing periods. The continued operation of the facility and the certainty provided by such as shared benefits and certainty for numerous parties, not solely Excel. Red Wing supports the benefits and the certainty that the state receives. The state receives the ability to position itself to meet its ambitious environmental and energy goals and to limit its carbon footprint. Red Wing supports the benefits and certainty that Excel receives. Excel receives reasonable regulations that provide it with the confidence it needs to determine if it's in their and their ratepayers' best interest to continue to operate their carbon-free nuclear fleet over the long term. Reading also supports the benefits and the certainty that our community and our region receives. The city and the region benefit by knowing that the continued operations of the facility will support our regional economy, employment-based, tax-based, and important philanthropic efforts. Continued operations of the facility will also provide the region with certainty that it can adequately sustain its housing markets, its schools, and its business community. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to testify. I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Representative O'Neill, you have the next testifier come forward.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Was the resolution from the City of Monticello also handed out?
Yes, it was. That was in the
Perfect.
handout.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now I have the Monticello Chamber of Commerce. I have three wonderful ladies, Rachel, Marcy, and Marie coming.
Awesome. Some chamber-on-chamber violence. This will be good.
What a providence.
Just trying to keep it light, folks. Just trying. Good evening. Welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Good evening. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My name is Rachel Leonard. I am the chair of the Monticello Chamber of Commerce and Industry for 2018. As a representative of the Monticello Chamber, our mission is to support, serve, and enhance the business sectors in Monticello. At our most recent meeting on April 10th, 2018, we received a brief summary of this bill, and our board of directors voted to support a resolution supporting this bill, in part based on the importance of Xcel Energy as a significant employer in our community, as well as due to their significant impact on our local economy. And we just want to make sure that we are supportive of them and supportive of the impact that they will have on the entire region. And with that, we thank you for the opportunity to testify this evening.
Thank you very much. Welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record if you wish to testify.
Marcy Anderson, the director of the Monticello Chamber.
Okay.
And Marie Jones, assistant director at the Monticello Chamber.
Just want to give each of you a chance if you want to add anything. Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Representative O'Neill, who's next on your list?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have Andy Snow from IBEW.
Good evening. Welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record and proceed with the testimony.
Thank you, Chair Garofalo. My name is Andy Snope. I am the legislative director for the IBEW Minnesota State Council. I'm speaking on behalf of the 16 IBEW local unions and 16,000 IBEW members in the electrical industry in the state of Minnesota. Over 600 of those IBEW members work at the two nuclear facilities in Monticello and Prairie Island. Hundreds more work at the facilities for contractors that help maintain the facilities. Today, I'm also speaking on behalf of the 70,000 members at the Minnesota State Building Trades. Again, hundreds of building trades members work at these facilities for Xcel or the contractors they contract with. We are happy to support our partners, Xcel Energy, in their request to see this bill passed and help them recover the costs of operations of their nuclear power production facilities. For many years, building trades members and IBEW members have worked with Xcel Energy to build, maintain, and operate the Xcel Energy nuclear power plants in Monticello and Prairie Island. Just a few years ago, Xcel hired contractors that put over 1,000 building trades members to work on the shutdown and retooling of its Monticello facility. It's good partnership, this is a good partnership which has provided for countless craft hours for work for our members while providing quality, skilled craftsmanship to our partner and our customer, Xcel Energy. Not only will this bill help maintain the stability of IBEW jobs and the continued operation of these facilities, but it will also help provide thousands of building trades jobs and continually maintain these facilities throughout the life of these plants. Jobs for all crafts related to building and construction. Please consider supporting House File 3708 and supporting the jobs for our members. That concludes my testimony. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Representative O'Neill?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Those are all my invited testifiers.
All right, this is a public hearing. Are there any members of the public who are in favor of the bill who would like to wish to testify at this time? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment portion. Representative O'Neill, any closing comments before we move to those who are opposed or have concerns with the bill?
Not at this time, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative O'Neill. All right, so members, now we'll hear from 5:40. We'll hear from those with concerns of the bill. First, we'll start with, the first on my list is Cam Winton from the Chamber of Commerce. And on deck would be Sarah Johnson Phillips. Those individuals can come forward.
I think Cam just stepped out.
Should we all make fun of him when he comes back? Okay. So, Sarah Johnson Phillips, welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Sarah Johnson Phillips, and I am a partner at the Stoll Reeves Law Firm, and I'm here to testify on behalf of the Excel Large Industrials. The Excel Large Industrials are an ad hoc consortium of large industrial end users of electricity that are Excel Energy customers. Together, these industrial companies consume in excess of 1.4 billion kilowatt hours annually and pay nearly $100 million annually in electric bills. My colleagues and I have represented this group in every electric rate case of Excel's for the last 13 years. The Excel Large Industrials oppose this bill. In Excel's last rate case, Excel, my group, the Excel Large Industrials, the Department of Commerce, the Chamber of Commerce, and other stakeholders entered into a settlement agreement that, among other things, included an agreement on a process for reviewing in depth the continued cost effectiveness of the nuclear facilities into the 2020s and 2030s. This bill undermines that agreement in two important ways. First, this bill eliminates any after-the-fact prudency review of nuclear costs. Second, the bill overturns the longstanding burden of proof and burden of responsibility on Excel to justify recovering costs of nuclear power in its rates. These changes would upset decades of legal precedent and shift risk to ratepayers before we have any solid information about the future cost of these facilities. In summary, this bill is a significant change to the utility rate-making policy in Minnesota that has not been well vetted, involves enormous costs and therefore enormous risks to ratepayers, and circumvents the process that Excel and other stakeholders agreed to for analyzing these issues in a deliberate manner that would allow thoughtful and appropriate decisions to be made about the future of the nuclear fleet. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Winton, I see that you're in the room. If you can testify next. Welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record and proceed to testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Cam Winton, Director of Energy Policy at the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce. I apologize for disappearing there. I had to attend to a thing, but thank you for the opportunity to testify today. So the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce opposes this bill. But before I turn to the reasons we oppose the bill, I'd like to take just a quick moment and share with you the things that I very much agree with, the Chamber very much agrees with, that Mr. Evans described in his testimony. And in case anybody has the question, Excel Energy is a member of the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce. And so the Chamber and Excel Energy have had extensive discussions over the past 6 weeks about this bill. So in no particular order, here are some things that Mr. Evans said that I think are 100% right. And I say these so that you all, as members, can focus in on the points of a dispute that still exist. First, it's absolutely true that the Excel Energy nuclear reactors provide baseload power. It's always on. It's there when we need it. That's important. Two, it's carbon-free. Let me emphasize that. It's carbon-free. That's fantastic. Three, this proposal from Excel Energy, while the Chamber does oppose it, is not the same type of request for subsidy, request for handout that some other utilities in some other states have asked their state legislatures for. And so Excel is to be commended for not doing what utilities in, for example, Illinois have done, just asking for checks from taxpayers to bail out their operations. So thank you to Excel for not doing that. Fourth, I agree with Mr. Evans that this request by Excel, again, while the Chamber opposes it for reasons I'll get to, it's not a blank check. The person who made the paper mache hat is to be commended. That is impressive paper mache work. The protesters who are saying that this is a blank check, but respectfully, that's not accurate. What Excel's looking for, as it shared with you, is more certainty. And everywhere I go in Minnesota talking to companies, they are looking for more certainty in Minnesota's regulatory process. So I can't fault anybody for seeking more certainty. But now let me turn to the reasons that the Chamber opposes the bill. It really comes down to two reasons. The first is more easily addressed. The first reason is that by some reads of the bill, whether it was the 1.0 as introduced, the Senate amended version, the DE, and Representative O'Neill, I rushed over it. Thank you for your work to incorporate ratepayer concerns. Thank you. It's possible to read the bill to mean that the utility would not need to continue operating the plants in order to recover funds from ratepayers that the utility spent on the plant. Now, I take the utility at its word that it's not looking to do that, but when writing laws, I think you'd all agree we have to go by the rule that what if none of us is around here to explain what we all meant by it? The words need to mean what we want them to mean. And so that is a concern about the current text that I think is relatively easily addressed. Let me turn to the Chamber's second concern that's not as easily addressed. It comes down to what I see as the crux of the bill. Is the PUC's review of the dollars that Xcel Energy spent before Xcel Energy spends those dollars or after Xcel Energy spends those dollars? The process we have here in Minnesota that all investor-owned utilities have used for decades and decades and decades is the utility spends the money, then and only then goes to the Public Utilities Commission and lays out receipts, so to speak, describes what it did when it spent that money. And the Public Utilities Commission evaluates those expenditures and determines whether or not they were prudent. That's a highfalutin word, but it's what's in the statute, whether or not they were prudent. If I could build on the analogy that Mr. Evans used earlier, and boy, I like Mr. Evans a lot, and so I say this with respect when I tweak his analogy a little bit. He used, just to refresh your memories, he used the analogy of the contractor who's doing work at your house. And doesn't it make sense that you'd agree on the price up front? Well, yes, of course, absolutely, if we're talking about a contractor that's doing work at your house. But to accurately describe the situation here, I think we have to tweak the facts and the analogy a little bit. Imagine if you had to use that contractor. You had no choice. That is your contractor, period, by law. And imagine that you had to use that contractor's services every single moment of every single day. And at the end of each month, you got a bill from that contractor. Well, that's a different situation. That is the situation that we have in our state with provision of electricity. So because of that, that's why we have Public Utilities Commission after the fact reviewing the money that the utility spent. And this bill, because of understandable aims about trying to get regulatory certainty, proposes to change that dynamic and do the review ahead of time. So in closing, if we want to continue that analogy, if you have to use that contractor, and that contractor is going to be performing services at your house every moment of every day, and at the end of every month you have to pay the bill, then it would make sense that some of the risk is going to be borne by the contractor, specifically that the contractor has to show you receipts before you decide that you're going to pay that contractor. That's our current system. That's what many members of the Chamber of Commerce think makes sense. And so finally, Mr. Chair and members, the Chamber has very much appreciated the conversations that we've had with Xcel. They're due a lot of credit for the changes they've made to the bill to address some of those concerns. As I note in this letter, the letter from the Chamber, we look forward to continuing those conversations in hopes to find compromise and a way forward. But as it stands currently, we do oppose the DE version of the bill.
Thank you. Next is Lee Samuelson. And this, Deputy Commissioner Grant, you're on deck. Good evening. Welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record and proceed with the testimony.
Chair Garofalo, members of the committee, name is Lee Samuelson, and let's see here. It looks like it's on subdivision 3, section B is the bill is what gives the advance predetermination of prudency, and it's concerned to the extent that it means effectively preventing the PUC from reviewing the ratepayers' money or whether it was any excess costs were due to poor management. I remember reading it when it first came out, an August 27th, 2014 Star Tribune article about the Monticello plant project, where Xcel's regional vice president is quoted admitting that nuclear upgrade projects across the country have virtually without exception required substantially more costs than initially anticipated. I have copies of it right here. And so if it's true of virtually all nuclear project upgrades, then how could it be possibly consistent or wise to legislatively enable the company to get advanced predetermination of prudency based on the initial estimate? And I also see that as subdivision 2, section B of both the House and Senate version of the bill identifies a process to bring additional proposals, quote, for nuclear plant spending that looks to fall outside of the established IRP process. My main concern is that under this new process, that the company will be able to do an end run around the part of the established IRP process, which holds them accountable to submitting to cost comparison studies, and that the more prudent route is to keep the IRP process that we have in place that weighs the cost and risk of their preferred plan nuclear project compared with the other possible less cost electricity mixes to reassure customers are getting the most cost-effective option. And so why exempt nuclear projects from having to compete on an affordability basis with carbon reduction mixes that do not include massive insurance subsidies? And when questioned about doing energy storage, I had personally heard a company spokesperson claim that energy storage does not yet have cost feasibility. However, I came across some of Xcel's own bid requests that they put out just a couple months ago that included a bid for wind plus storage at $21 per megawatt hour and solar plus storage at $36 per megawatt hour. And compare those numbers to the $97 per megawatt hour to $136 per megawatt hour for nuclear power in the 2016 Lazard report. And knowing this, it's why make a premature decision to fast track prudency. And I'm looking to prevent a scenario where Xcel customers will be on the hook to pay whatever cost overruns may occur in the future when vastly cheaper options are available. And one thing that I can't really get past is officially rebranding nuclear power plants as carbon reduction facilities. It conveniently overlooks how you have to literally boil uranium ore over coal fire and to gasify it in order to have the nuclear fuel in the first place. So it's nuclear power, it's not technically carbon free when you look at the entire process. But in order to get the designation of carbon reduction facility, nuclear power should be subjected to a technical total life cycle carbon analysis and be found to have a lower net carbon than competing energy options such as wind and solar plus storage. Otherwise, the language at the top of the bill feels a bit manipulative, to say the least. And then it's sort of like, why write legislation to protect this technology from market forces in a way that resembles a command economy? Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Commissioner Grant, and then Justin Fay from the Sierra Club's on deck. Welcome, Deputy Commissioner Grant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. Bill Grant for the Department of Commerce, and we appreciate the opportunity to comment on House File 3708. And the department does oppose the bill, and I want to outline the reasons why. First, and I know that Mr. Evans indicated that the overruns, the word he used to describe the situation with Monticello, were not overruns, but really the bill would allow Xcel to exceed without limit the costs that Xcel represented to the PUC would be the cost to operate Monticello and Prairie Island in certificate of need filings they made with the commission in 2005 and in 2008. And so for us, this lack of accountability to earlier commitments to cost control is really quite troubling. Second, it's important to consider the various costs and risks of resources in Xcel's integrated resource plan expected to be filed early next year. In the IRP, as Mr. Evans and others have pointed out, Xcel will provide the range of expected costs for its nuclear power plants to allow for comparison to other resources. That information will help the Commission and the parties determine the expected cost effectiveness of nuclear facilities at those predicted costs. The IRP, as we call it, is a well-established and important tool in Minnesota's regulatory review process. The goal is really to ensure that utilities can meet their customers' needs in a reliable and low-cost manner. Utility companies provide a forecast of expected electricity demand over the next 15 years and a plan to meet that demand. This could include the construction of new power plants, transmission lines, and demand management or energy conservation that they expect from their customers. Interested parties like the department, large and small customers, environmental groups, and others provide comments on the plan before the Commission ultimately approves the plan. And as you've heard, Xcel is not scheduled to file its next resource plan until February of 2019. In that plan, the company will provide information to show how it will achieve its carbon reduction goals, including, presumably, the role that its nuclear fleet will play in achieving those goals. And it really puts the cart before the horse to ask Xcel's customers to accept cost recovery for just the nuclear part of the IRP before the PUC and parties have had a chance to review the entirety of the company's plan. It would be like just picking out one aspect of the plan and saying, let's agree that we're going to pay for that part without agreeing what the rest of the plan looks like, or really whether or not that part of the plan makes sense in the rest of the plan. So in closing, Mr. Chairman, the department is opposed to House File 3708 because it is both premature and potentially harmful to consumers who may be asked to assume higher than necessary costs for their vital electric service. Further, the department believes the most prudent route is to use the IRP process to ensure proper analysis of Minnesota's future energy mix. Like the company, we remain committed to working with all the stakeholders to finding the best mix of resources to keep rates affordable while driving toward a carbon-free future. So with that, Mr. Chairman and members, I'd be happy to take any questions when you're ready.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner Grant.
Thank you.
Justin Fay, and then Annie Levinson-Falk is on deck. Welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record and proceed to testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening to members of the committee. My name is Justin Fay. I'm here on behalf of the Sierra Club, and we appreciate the opportunity to share a few thoughts regarding House File 3708. Minnesota generally and Xcel Energy in particular face a number of significant resource decisions in the coming years regarding how we're going to meet our energy needs in the coming decades. These decisions will have major impacts on our environment, on workers, on communities, and on utility customers. And Xcel customers and stakeholders deserve nothing less than a robust consideration of the best path forward that includes all of these perspectives. We believe that the passage of House File 3708 would actually make this work harder for three reasons. First, the bill attempts to provide certainty for Xcel shareholders, but does not do so for anyone else. Provides no certainty for consumers, no certainty for host communities, no certainty for plant workers, and no certainty for reductions in carbon pollution. Second, the bill is premature in being considered with far too little available information to understand what the impact of it would actually be, including no cap on cost, no commitment to actually following through with commitments to carbon reduction. Third, the bill undercuts the critical role of the Public Utilities Commission. It is not in the interest of Minnesotans to set a precedent that utilities, any utility, get to have financial certainty before demonstrating that their spending decisions are actually in the best interest of their ratepayers, who have little recourse and no choice if their customer ultimately overspends. For these reasons, we recommend a no vote today, and I thank the committee for your time.
Thank you very much. Ms. Levinson Falk, and then Bob Tamman. Bob, are you here? You'll be next. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. My name is Annie Levinson Falk. I'm Executive Director of the Citizens Utility Board of Minnesota, or CUB. CUB is a nonprofit advocate for Minnesota's residential and small business energy consumers. We recognize the importance of Xcel's nuclear plants to Monticello, Red Wing, and the surrounding communities, to plant workers, and to the utility and its customers as they make up a large amount of Xcel's energy supply. This bill would protect Xcel and its investors from the unpredictable costs of nuclear power. However, it accomplishes that only by shifting the risks onto Xcel's customers. I speak today on behalf of CUB, but in your packets you have a letter from CUB, AARP, Energy Sense Coalition, and the Citizens Federation Northeast expressing significant concerns about this bill on behalf of the ratepayers who would pay for it. That letter was written before the amendment that was presented today, and the amendment does appear to improve the bill. However, there are loopholes in the amendment that preserve the major issues with the first version for at least 3 reasons. It seems that lists are popular today, and I'll subject you to one more. First, the bill prohibits a review of how Xcel expends ratepayer funds. Typically, the process is that a utility gets approval to move forward on a project with a budget of a certain amount. The utility will do the project, then come back to the PUC, present an accounting of what they spent, and ask to recover that from customers in their electric rates. The PUC will review the costs, say, yes, you spent that prudently, and increase electric rates by what's needed to cover that cost. Under this proposal, a determination of prudency is made before any of the money is even spent. So as testifiers before me noted, there's no accounting and there's no review of receipts. Second, the bill would allow Xcel to bring additional proposals for spending on nuclear facilities outside the integrated resource planning process, with no limit to the number and dollar amount of those budget updates and no standard by which the PUC may evaluate those proposals. That means that those nuclear investments wouldn't be compared with other alternatives, and the PUC could never be sure of the total price tag. So it would not be possible to be sure that customers' money is being spent in the most cost-effective manner. Third, the bill would allow Xcel to withdraw its proposal for nuclear plant investments at the end of a resource planning process if the PUC modifies the proposal in its final decision. The PUC often modifies utility proposals based on information learned during the review process. That's one of the main purposes of a review. It's unclear how it would work for Xcel to withdraw a nuclear investment proposal, since at that point, the nuclear plant would be an integral part of the resource plan. Significant changes would need to be made to the plan after it concluded, after a year or more of regulatory review. If the planning process, did not have to be conducted all over again from the beginning. We're afraid that this could lead to an unnecessarily long, confusing, and costly regulatory process. Xcel has expressed concern about a repeat of the experience with its recent upgrades to the Monticello plant. In that instance, largely because of poor management, costs ballooned from the approved budget of $320 million to $748 million. The PUC allowed Xcel to recover all of its costs and to earn a rate of return for shareholders on the amount that was initially approved. Xcel was not allowed to earn a profit on its cost overruns. We believe this decision was fair. Customers paid for all of the cost of the company, even though this was more than double the initial budget, and shareholders earned the anticipated profit. This bill deals with an extremely complicated issue. Other states have spent at least 18 months creating special processes for cost recovery of nuclear costs in ways that do not harm electric customers. Minnesota has time to consider this issue. Xcel's next integrated resource plan, which will outline its plan for electric generation and related investments in the coming 15 years, is due next February and will be under consideration throughout 2019. I know that you're all trying to find the best solution for Xcel and its employees, for the communities that host nuclear plants, and for Minnesotans. However, this bill does not eliminate risks. It simply transfers them from Xcel's investors to its customers. I urge you to take your time to develop a solution that will protect the Minnesotans who will bear the cost of whatever is decided, and to not advance this bill today. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tamman, and then Matt Pravatsky from Fresh Energy. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Bob Tamman from Sudan, Minnesota, home of Minnesota's first iron mine. I spent several years working in the mines, which of course is boom and bust, so I'd come down here and work for Xcel Energy as a contract employee. As a matter of fact, in 1972, I was down here helping build the Prairie Island nuclear plant. That was 46 years ago, I was a pretty healthy young man. Now the years have gone by and some of my components are starting to fail a little bit, you know, the new hip, the coronary stents, and those plants have grown old along with me. Now, I'm not saying we should pull the plug, but it's time for us to start thinking about that problem, and I question whether we should be giving extraordinary encouragement to promoting these plants. And I speak because we have unplanned events out there, and maybe a young plant can respond quite well to them. You know, in the 80s, I was out there again to put in a new screen system for the cooling water they pulled out of the river. The old screen system got plugged by all the fishies coming in out of the river, and a nuke doesn't like to lose its cooling water. So we did a little modification. In the 90s, the first big transformer right next to the generator building there, nice and warm, the pigeons were roosting over that transformer. And pigeons did what pigeons do. And so I ended up out there again, changing out connections on a transformer. And so, along with the increasing age of our nukes and the unplanned events, which Murphy's Law hasn't been repealed, I think we should be quite cautious about trying to extend the life of those plants. And I would point out that I'm aware of the jobs issue. I appreciated the jobs I had at that nuclear plant. The wages were decent, the paychecks were nice, but as the years went by, I also ended up working out in the windmills. The wages were just as good. So I would urge this committee to not promote nuclear power from aging plants, and thank you for listening to this aging retiree.
Thank you for your testimony, sir. Retsky from Fresh Energy.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Matt Prabratsky. I'm the Director of Public Affairs for Fresh Energy. We're an independent nonprofit that conducts research and analysis on energy issues across Minnesota, and Fresh Energy is thankful for the chance to testify for you today. Xcel, as they said, says this bill is required for them to meet their 85% carbon-free goal, a goal that Fresh Energy strongly supports. But this bill really only addresses a small sliver of that vision while ignoring the rest. For instance, the bill does not guarantee that workers or the communities are taken care of, because the bill doesn't guarantee that the plants themselves will stay open even after these investments, or that the 85% carbon-free goal will be met because of these investments. So even after billions of dollars of investment, the plants could close early, leaving workers without jobs and the communities without the tax payments they spoke of earlier, even after Xcel ratepayers had to pick up the tab for expensive improvements. The language of the bill itself and the idea of predetermination of prudency also gives us pause. Making a decision about investments before they are made rather than after, when you have the benefit of hindsight, doesn't seem to make much sense. And more than anything, we feel this bill addresses only one sliver of a much broader issue. We would urge lawmakers to oppose this bill in favor of a more comprehensive conversation that fully addresses the needs of workers, the community, and the energy system. Thank you.
Thank you. Ann Frisch. Welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
My name is Dr. Ann Frisch. I am Professor Emerita, University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh. I live in White Bear Lake. I am opposing this bill and this broader practice of supporting nuclear reactors and the improvements thereof for a couple different reasons. But I do want to say that I support Xcel's efforts to do some solar and some wind, and I think that's the path we ought to be on. So there's a reason that Xcel Energy is seeking ratepayer security funding for renovations, is that investors in the free market don't want to invest in this. They want to invest their monopoly money in a dying business unless they're guaranteed a profit. So there's no risk for investors here. That's not the free market that I think we should be comparing to. Nuclear power is a dying business. Furthermore, it's an exceedingly dangerous business. There's no federal repository, so even anticipating improving and renovating these plants means a lot more nuclear waste is going to be put in little boxes and underground and flowing into our rivers as it is elsewhere. So solar, wind, geothermal, renewable sources of energy are far cheaper, and they are thriving. Ratepayers do not want to pay for antiquated nuclear reactors. Shut them down, don't renovate, decommission and autopsy them. We don't want them. We don't want to live with the increasing toxic radioactive waste that will continue to plague our communities for 1 million years. Please, we don't want to invest in horse and buggies. And what we are doing here in the passage of this bill is not only to secure the funding for these antiquated industry, but it's going to guarantee high rates of energy bills for business and homeowners into the next 30, 40 years. Better now. Let's go solar, let's go geothermal, let's go wind, and join the 21st century.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who wish to testify with opposition or concerns to the bill? Come on down. Welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you. Chairman Garofalo, members of the committee. My name is Chris Conry. I'm here representing Take Action Minnesota. We're a grassroots organizing organization working for gender, racial, and economic justice. We have members and supporters in every Senate district and offices both in St. Paul and Duluth. I'm here today to speak in opposition to House File 3708 as amended. We have 4 concerns. First, at its heart, the bill proposes to shift the financial risks associated with managing Excel's Prairie Island facility from the utilities to families who pay their monthly bills. Instead of recovering the costs of their improvements, Excel is asking ratepayers to front-load costs by paying for the improvements before they are done. This leads to our second cause for concern. By a new piecemeal review process, the bill would significantly limit the auditing functioning of the PUC, a process that was essential, for example, in protecting ratepayers from recent cost overruns at Monticello. Our third concern is related. This new untested process may undermine itself. The right to file additional proposals in Subdivision 2, Section 4B provides Excel with additional processes to try to amend the approved process and request more money. Finally, this bill doesn't really meet the multiple bottom lines that a true stakeholder engaged process could. This bill provides proposing significant risks, shifting significant risks rather, potentially $1 billion or more of costs from Excel to families who pay their bills, and does so with no guarantees about rates, about renewable energy, about good high-paying career jobs, or about making our energy system more equitable. Our state's energy future could be good for consumers, workers, local residents, and shareholders, but only if we build that by design. The problem with this bill is that it serves one stakeholder very well and guaranteeing nothing for anyone else. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Will the next testifier please come forward? Or was there another testifier? Oh, come on down. Is there any additional testifiers besides this one? Is this the last testifier of the night? Okay, this will conclude the public comment portion for those with concerns of the bill. Welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
All right, thank you. My name is Tim Springer. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members, for conducting this hearing today. I oppose House File 3708. It would allow Xcel Energy to recover costs spent on nuclear facilities without the suite of oversights that we have now. So my main concern is the main concern that you've heard others share here tonight, and that is through the integrated resource plan process, we take a look at alternatives. And if those alternatives are cheaper and better, then we do them instead. So we already know that wind and solar, for example, including storage, cost 1/4 or 1/5 as much. So please do not lock me in as a ratepayer to unnecessarily high energy costs. Don't lock your own constituents into unnecessarily high energy costs. And we heard some people here tonight talk about jobs, 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 and structural budget challenges in local communities with the loss of Excel's tax revenues in their coffers. That is not at all a compelling argument. I'm sorry. While I'm sympathetic to the loss of local jobs and the local tax revenues, it's like passing a government law that requires car drivers to buy Pintos in 2018 at 4 or 5 times the cost of other cars on the market. Yesterday's technology and overpriced. So how about something different instead to respond to those concerns? How about looking at economic conversion in those communities to tomorrow's technologies with wind farms, solar farms, training for smart grid management, et cetera? Let's look forward and not backwards and keep in mind the interests and needs of those local communities. Please don't be so spendthrifty and careless with money. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. That completes the public comment portion. Representative O'Neill, before we move to member comments and questions, did you have any comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have just a few. Several of the testifiers, I believe, are testifying to a portion of the bill that has been deleted. And I wanted members to realize that. Several of the testifiers had spoken against the rider that had been a part of the original bill, and that has been deleted. And so that's one thing. Second, there was a couple mentions.
Hold on.
Can she just explain, can she clarify what she means by the rider?
So Representative O'Neill, if you could just explain the section that was deleted in the original bill. I think you're talking about subdivision 4 and subdivision 5, is that correct?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am referring to the original bill would be lines 2.8 through 2.18. And it's specific to the carbon reduction rider. So several of the testifiers had talked about that Excel could come with additional changes and there would be not as much review, and that has been eliminated from the bill. So quite a bit of the testimony was in regards to that, and that's no longer a part of the bill. Another thing I'd like to address. It was mentioned a couple times, 2 or 3 different times, about this $21 cost of wind plus solar and $36 per megawatt hour of solar plus storage. And I'm going to have Excel probably speak to that, but those numbers are very, very low. I know new wind without storage is $22, but I don't know of any wind that's $21 plus storage. Storage is still very expensive.
And Representative O'Neill, I don't mean to instant fact check you, but I mean, I think your point is that certainly those prices may be accurate on a small scale level, but nobody thinks you can do that for 12 terawatt hours of annual energy in the state of Minnesota.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That is my point.
Okay, thank you.
And-
Representative O'Neill.
I wouldn't have mentioned it, but so many testifiers came up to say something to that effect, and it was just so glaringly inaccurate that I had to address it. Saying that wind, solar, and storage costs 1/3 or 1/5 or what 1/4 or 1/5 is just not accurate. Also, when the department came up, Mr. Grant came up and talked about basically spending without limit, being incredibly concerned about rates. I would just remind the committee about the conversation that we had had about the Made in Minnesota Solar Program. And if you recall, Mr. Grant came up to oppose eliminating the Made in Minnesota Solar Program as well. So, if we're going to talk about rates, we could talk about things like community solar that's still $140 a megawatt. Anyway, on we go. I would like to raise one point that I would like to have for conversation, and I will pose this to you so that we can have this conversation, and that is early closure of the plants. And that was not addressed in the bill. That was something that came up after I did the final DE, and I would like to have that conversation here. So if you could think about, and again, this is a conversation because this is very complex policy, but we don't have anything in there, what happens if there are early closure of the plant, and there's already a proposal that has been deemed prudent by the PUC through this very rigorous process before the expenditures are done. So if the plant, one or both, close early, we should probably have a conversation and something in language to deal with that. And I had thought about possibly doing a prorate. So if there is an early closure of one or both plants, that the expenditures that have been pre-approved by the PUC could be prorated. So I offer that for a suggestion. A couple of the different testifiers did talk about that, about the concern about early closure of the plants. Now, some testifiers want early closure of the plants, but I think the chamber and others were concerned about what that would do for costs. And so that is something that I would like to bring to bear and to have a conversation about. And that's all I want to talk about right now, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Before we move to member questions, I'm going to have some questions for testifiers, but I'm not going to take this out of this committee's time, so don't worry about the chair monopolizing it. So first of all, Mr. Evans, if you could come forward. Mr. Winton, I don't know if there's another chair if you want to come up there too. Chair? No.
Put over there.
So Mr. Evans, let me just, I hear a lot of the conversations today, and I'm reminded of the old adage, everyone wants to go to heaven, but no one wants to die. That's what I hear a lot of today on both sides of this. As a matter of cost, wouldn't it be true that if Xcel's nuclear power plants were decommissioned early and they were replaced with wind and natural gas, wouldn't that result in lower costs and keeping the nuclear plant open while still maintaining reliability?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, first of all, the answer is we don't know that. That's what the resource plan is for. And again, nothing in this bill changes anything in the resource plan. As the PUC sits down and listens to all of the parties that will come in to comment on the resource plan, they will be looking at the projected costs of all of the various options. But it's not just a cost decision because, there are other principles at stake here. We don't like to put all of our eggs in one basket. We don't want to rely exclusively on wind and gas and shut everything else down. Gas prices are low now, but they may not always be low. We also look at baseload versus intermittent energy or peaking energy. So there's a lot of discussion that goes into a resource plan. This is a very intense process, and that's the process that chooses between resources. So we in our last resource plan, we proposed the closure of 2 of the coal plants, and it was replaced with a large gas plant and a lot of renewable energy. And that was the decision that was made in that resource plan as it balanced the costs and benefits of all of these different resources. In the case of the nuclear plants, they will look at the costs of the nuclear plant, they being the PUC, in the resource plan process. They will look at the costs and the benefits of nuclear versus all the other resources that might replace them, and they'll make a decision about what, the best way to go forward. None of that is altered in any respect by this bill. That's the decision that they will make. In terms of closure, let me just say, if the decision of the PUC and the resource plan is to close down the nuclear plants, this bill becomes irrelevant because we're not going to plan costs and investments and everything else in plants that have been slated to close down. So it would completely change the conversation. On the other hand, if we were to have our budget approved and go forward with the plants, and then something were to happen that caused the plants to close down, then we go into a completely different process that has to do with the stranded costs. But we would not continue to make investments in plants that are no longer viable. So we think that this bill gives the PUC, for example, I mentioned before, the last sentence of the bill, this gives the PUC the opportunity to deal with those kinds of changes of circumstances, which we don't really expect to have, but if we did, for some reason the plant simply could not operate even though the resource plan had chosen them, then obviously the PUC would have to deal with that on a different basis. But it's not like we would say, well, gee, we got this budget, we're going to go make a whole bunch of investments in plants that are about to close just because, it was found prudent earlier. Obviously the circumstances would have changed. We certainly could say that in the bill with one sentence. I think it maybe goes without saying, but in an excess of caution, it would certainly not be difficult to cover that eventuality in the bill.
So, Mr. Evans, let me ask the question a different way then, because we kind of deviated off of my question on price. But across the nation, we're seeing nuclear power plants closing left and right. And the primary reasons people are giving is the low cost of natural gas and wind. Is there anything in Minnesota or MISO or the Minnesota region that would lead us to believe that that would not be more cost effective than retaining nuclear assets?
Well, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, the plants that are closing are largely in deregulated markets where they simply can't bid in at the price that other entrants can make. We have a different system here in Minnesota. This is an integrated system. And so we expect, I mean, I can't tell you that you're wrong, but I can tell you that that's a decision that will be faced in the resource plan as we balance, you know, all of the assets that might be there. I will also tell you that, you know, again, we're making plans for 15 years out, so we're not just looking at the situation today. In the case of nuclear plants that are closing, they're bidding into the system today. So yes, they might not look good compared to other resources today, but we're talking about a 15-year outlook and a 15-year, you know, future cost, in which case the price of gas is not necessarily going to remain the same, and a lot of other factors, but those are all considered in the resource plan and still will be considered in the resource plan.
Mr. Evans, is it fair to say that absent any changes in other factors, that if the only variable is whether this legislation passes or not, that it's more likely the nuclear plants will stay open with this legislation than without it?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, what we're seeking here is to avoid the situation where the nuclear plants might close, not because they're not cost effective, but because we can't tolerate the regulatory risk. As we've seen even in the testimony today, nuclear plants are controversial far beyond, you know, just the question of cost. And in Minnesota, they've been controversial in the past. And so what we're trying to establish here is some regulatory certainty going forward and not run the risk that the plants would close down due to uncertainty, not due to cost.
So the answer is yes?
Yes.
Okay, so thank you. Mr. Whitten, some different questions for you. Clearly, closing Xcel's nuclear assets early is going to result in a loss of 12 terawatt hours of energy on our system. This is going to be the equivalent, no matter how much wind in solar we intermix with that natural gas, you're talking about the environmental equivalent of adding 1 million new cars to the road.
Correct.
So I've seen in your opening statements the concern that the chamber has for greenhouse gas emissions and warming. You've heard from Mr. Evans, clearly this is an attempt to make it more likely, not a guarantee, but more likely the nuclear plants would stay open. So opposing this would make it less likely they're going to stay open and more likely we're going to have higher emissions. So why is the chamber's position on emissions that you're willing to roll the dice on a huge increase in carbon emissions?
Well, when you put it like that, Mr. Chair, it sounds pretty bad. But, respectfully, I would dispute the premise, and let me explain what I mean there. It's the chamber's point of view that even if this legislation doesn't pass, the utility would likely still proceed with keeping those plants running through the end of their licensed life, going before the Public Utilities Commission and seeking recovery for the money they spent on capital operations and maintenance. And my crystal ball is no better than anybody else's, but I think precedent indicates that the PUC would grant recovery. So if we could, let's just look briefly at Xcel Energy's experience with the Monticello upgrades, where the company did spend money. It ended up costing more money than anybody expected. Xcel Energy went in, this is all public record, Xcel Energy went in seeking recovery, and the Public Utilities Commission granted recovery of large costs that were greater than anybody expected. Now, the Public Utilities Commission, maybe I'm telling you all something you already know, but the PUC did not allow Xcel to earn a rate of return on those overruns. And Mr. Evans didn't like the term overrun, so we'll call it the extra. PUC didn't allow profit on the extra, but it granted the extra. And so I think when you look at that, that's pretty darn good precedent in very recent memory that Xcel could proceed even without this bill.
But,
and keep the plants open and therefore keep all the 1 million cars worth of carbon out of Minnesota's air.
To be clear, Mr. Wynn, my question isn't stating that if this bill passes, the plants will stay open, or if it doesn't pass, they're going to close. I'm simply saying this legislation puts the thumb on the scale that it's more likely to stay open.
Yes.
Okay, well, if that's the case, then not passing it makes it more likely they're going to close. It's the same thing. Mr. Winton.
It is, in a hypothetical question, yes, at the margin, more likely. But if I could, Mr. Chair, it is still more likely than not that even without this bill, the plants will stay open till the end of their license life. So you are correct, but I submit I'm also correct. We're kind of talking about two sides of the same coin.
You mentioned based on the precedent of this Public Utilities Commission, that it would be easy to predict they're going to keep this open.
Oh, I noted my crystal ball is not good. I didn't say easy.
Hold on. I would say that, you take a look at, I think there's some folks from Enbridge who would tell you that precedent really doesn't matter much with this Public Utilities Commission. And there's some people involved in the Solar Gardens projects that would say the predictability of this Public Utilities Commission is not exactly what it used to be. So with regards to predictability, can you understand why those who want to preserve these assets would be seeking to have, again, not an exclusive decision, but a thumb on the scale to say, at least we can have some sort of idea about what's going to be happening? Is that reasonable or not?
Yes, it is. And Mr. Chair, as I sought to convey on behalf of the chamber, both in the written letter and members' packets and in my testimony, the chamber absolutely understands why Xcel Energy wants more regulatory certainty. The devil then is in the details, and I expressed our key concern with the one key detail of the bill. But to the premise of getting more certainty, certainly, yes.
Because, it seems to me that there's two different positions someone can have about this. Is that one, for people who are concerned about CO2 emissions and global warming, you could say this is going to cost more to maintain these low carbon, zero carbon resources, and we're willing to pay those prices. Or someone can argue, well, our contribution worldwide is just not that big of a deal, so go ahead and close the plants, we're going to save some money. But what I'm hearing a little bit of is arguing both points. We want to keep costs low, but we do really care about the emissions going up. So explain that to me.
Sure. It's chamber policy, supported by the consensus viewpoint of our 2,300 members across the state, that the chamber supports nuclear power as part of an all-of-the-above approach to powering our society. All of the above, of course, being all the other ways to generate electricity. So we absolutely support nuclear power. We also support Xcel Energy making a fair return on the money it needs to spend for capital operations and maintenance to run those plants through the end of their licensed lives. I submit for the members' consideration, Mr. Chair, that that's an entirely consistent statement. I think it's then also fair for the chamber to note that putting that thumb on the scale in the particular way that this bill says is not the right move. There may be other moves where we do grant more regulatory certainty to Xcel because of the societal benefits of all of that baseload carbon-free electricity. This particular one isn't it. And finally, Mr. Chair, thank you for the time to give a long answer, but I want to note one thing that I neglected to mention earlier. We're talking about a lot of money here. I think you're aware of that. I just want to make sure all members are. It's public that Xcel Energy is contemplating spending $1.4 billion through this mechanism. This isn't 100 million or 500 or even $1 billion. It's $1.4 billion that comes out of all of our pockets. And so I am a believer in that old saying, measure twice, cut once. And that's why, because of the $1.4 billion expenditure, we are seeking to measure twice here.
Thank you, Mr. Whitten, and thank you, Mr. Evans. Hopefully my questions were fair and not
fair and balanced.
Too tough. If we could have Mr. Fay, Ms. Levinson-Falk, Mr. Pravatsky, and Mr. Conroy come down. This is a group. It'll be easier. Marion, you're going to want to go to the side. Is Ms. Levinson-Falk still here? She's not? Okay. And who am I missing? Who's the fourth one? He's coming down. Okay. Is he? Okay. No? Okay, just you two then. So let me just ask a hypothetical. If the legislature offered a compromise in which this proposal was tied to a higher renewable energy standard from Xcel Energy, is this something your organization would consider? I'll state your name for the record and.
I'll take a first shot at that. Justin Fay with the Sierra Club again. I think it's To be honest, Mr. Chairman, I don't know. I think there's some significant problems with the bill. We'd have to, we'd have to consider something in writing if we, somebody wanted to put that forward, we'd take it seriously and look at it.
Mr. Pravetsky.
I would say, as mentioned, as Mr. Chair, Matt Pravetsky with Fresh Energy, I would say, as mentioned in our testimony, I think the vision that Excel lays out is one that we have stated that we support, so an 85% carbon-free, and obviously that takes care of the communities and the workers that are involved. If that type of a discussion were to take place, we would absolutely be interested in having that discussion.
Thank you to both testifiers. I have other questions, but I've talked way too much, so we'll go to other member questions. Thank you, guys. Representative Newberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is the question here for the testifiers, is the gentleman from Red Wing still here?
I'm sorry, he had to leave.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative O'Neill. Well, this will suffice. I want to take a holistic look at this, so please don't tell my wife I used that word. The whole object of this committee has always been cleaner and cheaper, and I want to look at this, and we're talking about potential money, we're talking about how much could be spent. There's been some big numbers that have been floated out there, but I want to make sure that this committee has a real, oh my gosh, I'm going to say it again, holistic view of this issue. The city of Monticello does not take LGA because of the nuclear power plant. I live in the city of Becker, which also does not receive LGA because of the taxes that they get back from the Sherco power plant, Go Coal. Point being is that LGA started in 1971. It was part of the Minnesota Miracle. The Monticello plant was also built in 1971, so I'd like to think it was part of the Minnesota Miracle as well. We have to remember that the Monticello plant employs about 450 workers, and these are very high-paid jobs. The Red Wing plant, which was built in 1973, 2 years later, employs about 400 workers, which are also very high-paying jobs. And the economic impact to these communities and in Minnesota, I would believe, would be much more than we can calculate in an easy hour. But what I really want to touch on is the potential savings that Monticello and Red Wing, I'm just going to stay with Monticello because we don't have the answer for Red Wing. Monticello not getting LGA, if we compare it to Bemidji, Otsego, Fergus Falls, and Sauk Rapids, which are similar in population, we come up with an average here. Bemidji gets about $3.3 million in LGA. Otsego gets $143,000. Fergus Falls gets $3.6 million, and Sauk Rapids gets $2 million. If we times that, we add them all together, we get $2,260,750. Times that by 43 years, $97,212,250 potential dollars that the city of Monticello has saved the taxpayers in LGA since the Minnesota Miracle in 1971. If you average that out, if we look forward, if the plants close in 12 years, just by keeping these things, keeping the Monticello plant, I had more numbers for Red Wing, but this is all just quick math. You can look here. I got all my scientific scribbles going, but I was working pretty hard here. So point being is this, looking forward, if we close the Monticello plant 12 years from now, Monticello plant, by staying open, will save the taxpayers just out of the chute at current levels over $27 million in LGA payments that would not go to Monticello. So let's keep this in mind, folks, that as we move forward, just by having these plants open, they are saving every single city money. They're actually contributing money to the overall fund by not taking money out because those plants are open. I'm a strong proponent of nuclear power. It is still part of the future. Someone had made a comment earlier that this was could compare it to a Pinto, a Ford Pinto. I think that's grossly inaccurate. If you look at the technology, I know the people. I have personal friends that work at those plants. These are some of the most intelligent people you'll find anywhere in the United States, and these are cutting-edge scientists, and these are people that have worked with the upgrades, and they've worked in these plants and the computer systems. I've toured these plants. So to compare them to a 1971 Pinto is grossly inaccurate and a little bit insulting to the people that work at those plants. Suffice to say, there is a future for nuclear power, and I support this bill. And thank you very much, Representative O'Neill, for bringing this forward.
So So Representative Newberger, while it might be true that this would save LGA payments from the state perspective, isn't there a benefit to saying that if you close these plants, you're going to save ratepayers money?
Mr. Chair, I would have to say no to that. You potentially could, but let's march the math out as it comes. I'm just arguing the point as I see it with the facts that are, or with the numbers that are before me. And if someone tries to back me into a corner, and I'm not hinting that it's you, but if somebody tries to back me into a corner and try to get me to change my stand on supporting coal or nuclear baseload power systems, which this state must have, you're not going to change my mind. So thank you.
All right, with that, Representative Rarick. Representative Rarick, careful.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not going to ask any questions. I'm just going to make a couple statements. It seems like most of the arguments that we had here today were either opposed to the original language of the bill, not to the amendment that was brought forward now. They were, not considering what was talked about and negotiated. You're talking to the old language. Or it was just talking about being opposed to nuclear in general. So a lot of the discussion opposed to it wasn't done very well, in my opinion. I really did appreciate Mr. Winton in his statements. I mean, he did at least come out and talk about what was good before he came out with what was bad. The one thing that I have to, the analogy that was put out by both, I think was done a little bit wrong on both parties. If we're going to compare this to doing a house the way this is being done, I would say the correct analogy is to say, me as a homeowner, I want to do a project and I am required to use a specific contractor. So I ask that contractor to come in, do the work, and then after they're all done, they propose the bill and a third-party arbitrator would determine what is a qualified expense that the homeowner, me as a homeowner, would have to pay. That's what we're doing right now. And what this bill to me is asking is to say, instead of going through that process, we're going to have that contractor come in, give their bid. I will determine if I think that is what I want done, and a third-party arbitrator would determine what would be the cost for those projects. That, to me, makes absolute sense. I can't see doing it the other way. Saying, do the work and then we'll determine. Nobody would be a contractor out there under that provision. And conversely, no one would ever want to hire someone to come in to do a project if you really didn't know what the expense was going to be prior to authorizing the work. So when we use that analogy, I think if we use it correctly, I think this bill gets us to where we should be for ratepayers, because it means you will have what is really done, what is needed, done at the right cost. And for people that were saying this is a blank check and that they would be able to, overruns would be added in and everything, and you can't really figure out what the costs are going to be. I mean, the whole construction industry is based upon the idea that you bid a project, you know what materials are going to cost, you know what labor is going to cost. All of these things go into it, and I think we do a very, very good job of determining what the costs are. What we're talking about, why the costs were so much higher, is because I believe when they originally went into the project, they didn't really know everything that was going to have to be done. It was very similar to the capital project. We thought we knew what it was going to be, but as we got into the project, we found new things that had to be done. So if we would call Excel's deal as being overruns, well, so was the capital. But the overruns were things that we found along the way and determined needed to be done to do it right. So I think this bill gets exactly at the things that need to be done to help Excel have the certainty it needs and to have ratepayers be covered, because it's not the ratepayers, it's not Excel. All of these things still go through the PUC and the resource plan. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Rarick. I gotta tell you, I just would have been so hilarious if you came out against this bill, though. I just really would have, it would have been really funny. Representative New.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to make sure that well, let me clarify. I don't understand this process, and I would like some clarification. We keep referring back to the Monticello project, and perhaps this is for Mr. Evans. My question is, we keep talking about these overruns of the budget. My question is, what budget? Did the PUC approve anything prior to the project happening? Where does this initial budget come from? Or does that come after the fact that the PUC decided what? That some of the upgrades were not prudent, that the cost of the upgrade was too much? Where are we coming up with this idea that about this overrun?
And Mr. Evans, if you could, I think rather than, we don't want to digest the Monticello situation, but we do want to explain what the current process is
Yes,
supposed to be.
yes, exactly.
I mean, I don't want to take your question away from you, but
No, that's
I think that's kind of what, like, so what is the process supposed to be? And I think it'd be fair to have someone maybe offer a different opinion than you on it too, because this is complicated. So, Mr. Evans.
Mr. Chair and members of the committee, so there's a couple of places that costs are discussed currently. One process is called the Certificate of Need, which is a process in front of the Public Utilities Commission where we come in with a particular project or a particular facility, ask the Public Utilities Commission to certify that we need that, because we don't want to go build it if they haven't certified that we need it. And when we do that, there is a high-level budget that's presented along with that so that they have some idea of costs. In addition, when we do the resource plan, we come in with a fairly high-level budget that gives some idea of costs. And in the case of Monticello, it was actually the Certificate of Need budget, again, very high level, not very detailed, but giving some idea of costs, which turned out to be inadequate. So what this bill would do is give us a new opportunity to come in advance of spending the money and present a much more detailed budget. With exactly what we have in mind, and it would be for some period of time going forward. It wouldn't be for 20 years in all likelihood. It's hard to budget something out 20 years, but for some period of time going forward, we would present a much more detailed budget. Now, in the current process, it's not a budget, it's actual expenditures, but the decision to be made by the PUC and all of the interveners is the same, and that is, were those prudent expenditures? We're asking that that decision be put at the front end of the part, but the question is really the same. Here's the costs, here's what we're going to get for them. Do you think those are prudent expenditures? So there's really, the process, the examination, the things that are being analyzed in the advanced determination of prudence are the exact same thing that would be analyzed in a rate case. You're just doing it at the front end of the process rather than the back end.
And if we could, I do want to give, I'm just going to look, Deputy Commissioner Grant, do you want to chime in on this to add, to either agree, disagree, contradict, add, subtract, just so we're making sure that we, there's always some opinion interjected into fact, so I just want to make sure.
Sure.
Deputy Commissioner Grant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bill Grant, again, for the department. A couple things about this. First of all, and I didn't mention it when I testified, but the department is currently at the Commission's request reviewing the costs associated with keeping Prairie Island open to the end of its license. We're expecting to have that report available sometime in early summer, and we expect that that will get fed into the resource plan and be part of the discussion about what those costs actually are. So we're talking here a little bit in the abstract about what the future costs of operating the nuclear plants are. The number 1.4 billion has been tossed around. We may validate that number. We might find that that's half again too low or 2x too high. So I just wanted to point that out. When it comes to determining this notion of advanced determination of prudence, this isn't the first time the legislature has considered advanced determination of prudence. You granted advanced determination of prudence for the Big Stone power plant a number of years ago. I believe the department objected to that rate treatment then, and I think we all know how that turned out. And frankly, we wouldn't support advanced determination of prudence for a solar project, for a new storage project, because for the exact reasons that Mr. Winton pointed out. That is not how we do rate making. We determine prudence after the fact, not before the fact. And that's what this bill does. It puts the cart before the horse. And in this case in particular, when we're trying to determine whether or not something as unknowable as the future of these nuclear plants, not only how much are they going to cost to operate, but how uncertain are those costs? What is the range of uncertainty about the future costs of nuclear power? If we could say with certainty today, we know to the penny how much it's going to cost to operate them, that would be one thing. But the Fukushima disaster changed the equation on the cost of nuclear power by a factor of 2 or 3 times. And if we were to have another one of those accidents in the intervening period of time, all of the equations that we had made for the future cost of nuclear power would change dramatically. And so this is not something that we can know with certainty, and that's why we do prudence reviews after the fact.
Thank you. Representative New, did you have a follow-up?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, as a follow-up, I've heard several times this statement that it's just not how we do it, and I don't find that to be particularly compelling. So as a follow-up, my question is, is there a reasonable mechanism in place by which Xcel could have planned or executed differently to be more in line with the PUC's final decision?
Okay, so I'm just going to take your question again. I'm going to twist it.
Great.
So rather,
fine.
just the facts of the Monticello situation were that events significantly changed after the PUC took action, right? So if that sort of change took place now going forward, is there a way to address that in advance? Is that a fair way, or do you want to? I'm trying to avoid looking back in time, Representative.
Yeah. My question is, if we do not pass this law, is there a mechanism in place for Xcel to more reasonably project its costs? Is there a crystal ball, for lack of a better word, for Xcel to figure out how they might be in line with the PUC?
Mr. Evans.
Mr. Chair, Representative New, you made it hard to answer the question because you said without passing this bill. What this bill would, I'll tell you this, if we're coming in with a budget and that budget is going to act as a cap, as we are proposing, so that anything we spend over that budget is our risk, you can bet we're going to come in with a budget that we think makes sense. That's our incentive to do that. And the PUC can look at that and either decide it's a good idea or a bad idea, that they like that cost or they don't like that cost. But, again, I know you don't want to go back to Monticello, but frankly, if we had come in with a budget for Monticello and then come in, double the cost, that's our risk because we've already locked ourselves into the budget that we presented back at the advanced determination of prudence if we get that opportunity. So we think we're very good at projecting the budgets. We think the PUC and others have strong staff to look at those and analyze those and determine if those are the right expenditures. And we think that's the protection for the ratepayers and the protection for the unknowable because we come in and project those. We come in and not only tell you what we think those are going to be, but we commit ourselves to that in this process, making it a cap. Now, someone did note, we left ourselves the option of coming back in. If some disaster were to happen and the costs were double, we come back in. But at that point, the PUC and all the interveners can say, you know what? We've got your budget. You gave it to us 2 years ago. They don't have to approve the new budget. They may want to for various reasons, but they don't have to. We've already locked ourselves into one budget, and then we're going to have to make the decision about how we deal with that risk going forward.
Okay. Representative Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I could blow holes in the deal with the capital because I think it's I think they're apples and oranges because I tell you what, you go down this road and we don't know what some of those cost overruns are going to do and how do you project that. And I don't think this bill addresses that real well. But I guess I just want clarification on lines 2.4 to 2.6. And it talks about establishing a sliding scale rate of return mechanism. Can somebody explain how that thing is supposed to work and how that is going to be applied to costs?
It appears Mr. Evans is phoning a friend.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I'm going to ask Al Krug from Xcel Energy to answer the question.
And again, I will, if there's, I think Deputy Commissioner Grant, if you wish to chime in this answer, let us know. Welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, committee members. My name is Al Krug. With Xcel Energy. The sliding scale mechanism would essentially provide a incentive either way, either a positive or negative incentive should we, in fact, either come in with costs lower than our projected budget or higher than. Now, in the case of higher than, given the way the statute is written, we would already be capped in any case. But just for the example of a potentially a lower, if we came in lower, generally the way the statute is written now, we would only charge customers for documented actual costs. If in fact the commission wanted to provide additional incentive for us to lower costs below, in fact, what our budget was, and of course that could happen over a long period, they could provide some sharing mechanism by which we would then profit from additional lowered costs. But obviously our customers would also benefit in the same way.
And Deputy Commissioner Grant, he says fine. Representative Howell, is that it?
Well, I hope that explained it to somebody, but that just went right over my head. I don't understand exactly, how does that work? I mean, what if you come in lower, do you get a bonus for coming in lower? So the ratepayers, how does that affect the ratepayers? If you blow the budget and come in higher, the ratepayers get a cheaper rate? Or how does it, explain how it's actually going to work, I guess. This says you're going to establish it. My question is, what effect does that have on the profit share, the shareholders? What does that affect on the ratepayers? That's what I'm looking for.
Sure. Apologize if I wasn't clear before, but let me just give a specific example. If we had suggested that our project was going to cost $100, and we had a sliding scale mechanism where anything below $100, we retain 10%, and we then the project came in at 90, so we would keep $1, right? Just that simple, and customers would get the benefit of the remaining 9. In the case of the other, if we were over, of course. For one thing, there is a bit of a mismatch in the legislation, meaning we've already established a cap, but if the commission so chose, if we came in at 110, customers would pay $109 and we would eat $1.
Mr. Krug, if the project costs $100, I'm going to pay for it. We're just going to adjourn the committee, okay?
I'm in as well.
Is that good? Okay, thank you. Mr. Krug, where in the bill is the cap? Where's the, because when I read it, I didn't see that, but where would I find that in the delete all amendment? Or Mr. Evans or Representative O'Neill?
Representative Garofalo, Chair Garofalo, if you look at it's subdivision 3, part D, and the way that works is the utility shall be entitled to recover through a subsequent rate case any actual costs not in excess of the expected cost provided in its proposal. And so that is effectively a cap.
Okay. A suggestion for the author in Excel. If the intent of that section is to do that, it would seem like there may be a way to word that in legislative speak a little bit easier. Just a suggestion.
Appreciate that.
Yep. Representative Anderson and Wagenius. Representative Anderson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I had a question for Mr. Grant, if he would come back and apologize for the musical chairs here. And also Mr. Evans, too, would be on deck for another question. Mr. Grant, could you compare, we're kind of talking in hypotheticals here, could you compare the prudence review being done before the fact and then after the fact, if, heaven forbid, an occurrence like Fukushima happened again, how would that would be handled differently under the before the fact and after the fact reviews?
Deputy Commissioner Grant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Representative Anderson. In the case where an accident like Fukushima were to happen during the period in which the project were occurring, and let's say then the Nuclear Regulatory Commission were to impose some additional costs on the facility to account for whatever new safety mechanisms they decided needed to be put in place, the commission, the Public Utilities Commission, would then look at whether or not Xcel's response to those new safety regulations were appropriate, and whether or not the resulting costs that were then needed to address those safety regulations were in fact prudent.
Representative Anderson.
Again, after the fact.
So, Mr. Grant, as I understand it then, if they had done the prudence review before the fact and had established a cap on price, if a large event occurred, the NRC says you have to do this and that, there'd still be a mechanism to come back and add to the dollar total of the project. Is that correct?
Deputy Commissioner Grant.
Mr. Chairman and Representative Anderson, certainly the company could always return to the commission after the fact if they didn't have an advanced determination of prudence, and approach the commission with the facts that occurred during the operation or during the construction of the project, and propose that those additional costs be recovered from ratepayers, yes.
Okay, Senator Anderson.
Thanks. And maybe Mr. Grant can answer this question too. One of the testifiers talked about if this bill were to pass, it could result in extending the life of the plants, and I think they thought that was a negative. I don't. But as I understand, these plants have been licensed to run, in Monticello's case, 2030, and the Red Wing plants a couple of years past that. So again, barring the fate of this bill, does it really affect the ending date of when these plants would potentially shut down, being they're licensed for another 12 years or 15 years?
Deputy Commissioner Grant.
Mr. Chairman and Representative Anderson, no, I don't see the bill as affecting the end date of the plant. I think that's a decision that the commission will make once we've reviewed all of the information in the next resource plan, and we make a collective decision about whether the projected costs of continuing to operate relative to the other alternatives that are available for generating that same amount of electricity, and those costs are costs that we want to sustain. And that's, I think, the decision that's in front of the commission. I don't think an advanced determination of prudence changes that equation.
Representative Anderson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. You're being very nice to me. Very good.
I can change. I mean,
well, just a couple comments. Again, from things that were said by testifiers. One said that if you consider the life cycle of the nuclear fuel and whatever, that it's really not carbon-free. And I would ask, what is carbon-free? Solar panels, a lot of them come from China or wherever they come from. They have to be manufactured. Wind towers are manufactured. The blades, a huge process to make those. So to say that nuclear is not carbon-free, I would just ask, what is carbon-free, and wonder about that. The other one was, somebody mentioned that wind and solar are thriving, and I would add they're thriving with subsidies. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Representative Wagenius, and then May Quaid.
For Mr. Evans, or your, I have heard several testifiers say that the expected cost of the improvements we're talking about is $1.4 billion. Did you say that too?
Mr. Evans.
Mr. Chair, Representative Agini I mean, that's, I guess, part of what we would determine. I mean, they will be expensive to run. I'm not sure they would be expensive compared to what might replace them, but it is a significant investment in the plant.
Representative Wagenius.
I just actually want to know a number or a range. So is it $1.4 billion? Is that to upgrade and operate, or is it just to upgrade? And if you don't know a number, what would the range be that we were talking about?
Mr. Evans.
Mr. Chair, Representative Agini first of all, there is no uprate planned at Prairie Island, which is what we did at Monticello, which would increase the output of the plant. So this would be essentially continued operations, investments that would be to allow the plants to continue to operate. I don't know what the range of that cost might be, but I will get that and share it with the members of the committee.
Representative Wagenius.
Well, I mean, two people actually put $1.4 billion on the table, and I think we need to understand what that is and what it actually means. And if there isn't a number, then give us some bumpers, what it would be. But I also want to know, would that in that $1.4 billion, if that is indeed the number, would that also include the costs of managing the additional casks that we would be generating over those next 12, 15 years?
Mr. Evans.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, Representative Wagenius, yes, that would include, that's kind of an all-in cost. So, you know, we would be looking at the cost of running the plant for whatever period of time in the future we're looking at, and that would include, you know, all the refueling, all of the storage of the spent fuel, you know, any number of, you know, anything that is involved in actually operating the plant.
Representative Wagenius.
Okay, we've now built the cask, put the stuff in. What about the management costs going forward? Are those included too?
Mr. Evans.
Mr. Chair, Representative Wagenius, so while the plant is operating, those would be those would be maintaining and, you know, guarding the fuel and all of those things would be a part of the operations. Once the plant closes down, then we're into a whole new set of regulations with the NRC in terms of how we manage the decommissioning of the plant, the eventual dismantling of the plant, and how we manage the continuing operations of the spent fuel. So that's really for the period after the plant is no longer running, that's really a different question outside the scope of what this bill would involve. But those costs would certainly, you know, continue as long as the spent fuel was there.
Representative Wagenius.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, I understand that the operation, you know, that you are going to be including those, but they're going to theoretically shut down in 12 to 15 years. So we do need to know how these additional years are going, what are we buying with this money? I mean, what obligations are we buying with this money? So or with this decision. So we do need to know the 1.4, and then after 12 to 15 years, the costs that we are incurring because of this change.
Mr. Chair and Representative Wagenius, so, you know, there are both NRC and I believe state regulations concerning ensuring that the money is there to continue to safeguard the fuel. And so that's an ongoing obligation of the company. Some of that is prepaid, I think, in the Nuclear Decommissioning Trust. So there are a number of processes by which we are, you know, required to ensure our regulators that we will have the money to do what we need to do as the plant continues and as the plant closes down.
Representative Wagenius.
My question would be about the part that is not prepaid. So if we can understand what that added cost is.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I'm going to have to do a little research on that, and I'll get back to everyone on that.
Representative O'Neill, you wish to add something?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had just done a little bit of research about this before we came to committee, and actually Cam Winton and I looked at this very carefully. If the $1.4 billion is accurate, I can't say if it is or isn't, but I can tell you that it basically comes down to $34.5 million per year per reactor. That's because that's over the lifetime. So if this is an all-in cost for the 3 reactors over the course of their licensure right now, that's $34.5 million per year per reactor. So if you think of it in those terms.
Representative Make-Wade and Metza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have some technical questions. I'm pretty agnostic on nuclear. I don't really have an issue with that. I'm going to go direct you to 2.19 to 2.23. So any carbon reduction facility, the approval shall constitute a finding of prudency for the total expected costs, which then can be recovered through a subsequent rate case if the total expected costs provided are not in excess of what they said before. My question is, let's say to the POC, the estimated costs were 1.4 billion, and you ended up and you laid out all the things. So reactor metal, I have no idea what goes into making a nuclear plant. So fans and reactor metals and whatever. And then when you actually did it, you got cheaper metal and cheaper fans, and you came in under budget. So then you used the other 4 billion or 100 million and bought Teslas. So that adds up to 1.4 billion. Could you then recover all of that money from ratepayers?
Mr. Chair, Representative, no.
Okay.
When we came in, so this question of cost recovery occurs when we come in for the next rate case. And let's assume that we had gotten a budget approved of $1.4 billion, and we came in and it only cost $1 billion. So we have to show the PUC in our rate case what we spent on the things that we said we were going to do. And if it was $1 billion, then we recover $1 billion. If it was 1.4 billion, we could recover 1.4. If it was 1.5 billion, we're at risk for the 500 million that we didn't have that was not determined prudent at the beginning of the process.
The 100 million, not the 500 million.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, right.
100 million, okay. Representative Make-Wade.
Mr. Chair, thank you. And so let's take whatever the other thing I just said off the table. I'm sick, obviously. But let's say you spent it on what you said you were going to spend it on, but you got the cheaper versions of it, and so you did come in under cost. What about this rate of return? Would you then make money off of coming in under cost?
Mr. Evans.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, so the sliding scale rate of return is an option that would be given to the PUC. And we've used that before in other projects, particularly the MERP, the conversions, I know when we converted our coal plants to gas plants. It's not required. It's an option with the PUC. If the PUC said, we would like to give you an incentive to come in under budget, and so if you come in under budget, we will allow you to share, as Mr. Krug posited, possibly 10% of the savings. So they don't have to do that. It would be something that sometimes works out in the economics and they want to do, but it's not required. And of course, it would only happen along the lines that they proposed. If they said, if you save X dollars, we'll let you keep 10% of it as a bonus to give you an incentive to save that money, then that's what we would get. But again, it would all be up to the PUC. They make every decision along the way.
Representative Make-Wade.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This question is for Representative O'Neill. On 2.1 to 2.3, we're talking about the proposal being, additional proposals being filed. Does that mean additional proposals filed up until approval? Can they file new proposals after approval? Can you walk me through that?
Representative O'Neill. This is 2.1 to 2.3, you said?
Mhm.
Yep, Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Make-Wade. Rick Evans will answer, apparently.
Mr. Evans.
Mr. Chair, members, the intent is that that could be at any time. So what that's supposed to cover is, for the example people were talking about, a change in circumstance where there's an accident in another plant, and so we've come in and we've presented our proposal, and let's say we've had it approved, the expenses have been found to be prudent, and we go forward, and then something happens and we realize there's not going to be enough money. We haven't allowed ourselves enough money. Then we can come back into the PUC and say, we need more money. We don't think we can do it for what we said before. Again, the PUC is the driver of the car here. They can say, you know what, tough. You gave us a price before, that's the price you live with. Or they could say, no, we want you to go ahead and expend that money.
So Deputy Commissioner Grant used this term earlier, unknowable. that an appropriate term for this section or not?
Yeah, you know, the idea is that we can't sandbag and come in with the first budget and know that, well, by the way, we know we've got these other expenses, but we'll come in and get that later. We would have to come in and demonstrate that, no, there's something that has happened that we did not expect, that was not knowable at the time we submitted our original proposal, and that's why we're submitting a follow-up proposal.
Representative McQuaid.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so then if we're going down to 2.16, if you don't accept the modifications that the commission might make, it's withdrawn, then what happens?
Representative McQuaid, where are you at?
Sorry, 2.17, 2.18. If the PUC modifies the proposal and the utility doesn't accept the modifications, then it's withdrawn, then what happens?
Mr. Evans.
So, Mr. Chair and Representative, so in the first instance, we come in with our proposal and we say it's going to cost this amount of money, and let's say the PUC says, you know what, we want to modify this, and we're going to, you know, give you a smaller number. At that point, we can withdraw our proposal. Now, nothing has happened at that point. Nothing's been found to be prudent. It would be in the same situation that we would be in today. We simply would. Or we could say, you know what, we accept your modification and we're willing to live with your modification. Now, once that's approved, the proposal is approved and the budget is established, the cap is set. If another circumstance were to happen and we would come in and say, oh, we need more money because of something that was unknowable, we can't erase the prior one. The prior one's already happened. That finding's been made. If they modified the second proposal, we could say, well, no thanks, or yeah, we'll accept your modification. But again, we've already made our, you know, kind of put our flag in the sand here on the first one, and that doesn't get reversed. We just now we have to live with that and decide what we're going to do.
Representative McQuaid.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And then this is for Representative O'Neill again, line 2.7. The commission shall approve, reject, or modify the proposed designation of the facility under what criteria? That's not laid out in this bill.
Representative, so the commission shall approve, reject, or modify the proposed designation of the facility. Okay, Representative O'Neill. Or Mr. Evans or Mr. Krug?
I'm not sure. Of the designation
Well,
facilities and
Mr. Chair and Representative, the standard is prudence. That's what we're asking them to find. We're asking them to find whether the budget we propose is prudent. And this is something they do, as the other testifiers said, they do this currently at the end of the process. So it's not an unknown factor. They have their standards by which they determine prudence. It's just that they're putting it at the front of the process rather than at the back of the process. But the standard is whether the expenses, the budget that we propose is a prudent budget.
Representative McQuaid.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you give me an example of something that has been deemed not prudent by the PUC that utilities spend money on?
Mr. Krug.
Anything ever found imprudent? Has anything ever been found imprudent?
Is there anyone from Minnesota Power here? That was hilarious. Welcome back to the committee. Please restate your name for the record.
Thank you, Al Krug with Xcel Energy. You know, generally, there aren't a lot of decisions rendering our actions imprudent. A recent one within about the last year was actually some purchase power expenses that we incurred because of an outage at the Prairie Island facility, and the commission did find those to be, they disallowed those and found those to be, our actions to be imprudent. And so it does occur on occasion. I apologize, I can't think off the top of my head in other situations, but it does occur on occasion.
Representative McQuaid.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I think just to go off some of the analogies that we were talking about before, if we haven't had a ton of things happen that have been deemed imprudent, I'm not really sure where the uncertainty comes from, except something that you did do that was deemed imprudent, so that causes me concern. I was a nanny in high school, and I gave the kids I nannied for $20, and I said, go to the movies, have fun, and they came back, and I said, what movie did you see? And they said, like a cartoon, but you don't want to see the ticket stub. And I was like, well, now I want to see the ticket stub, right? When you don't want me to look at it, and I really want to look at it. And I think so the analogy I would use, right, is that this is utility stuff that Minnesotan ratepayers in Excel territory have to pay for. And so the regulatory body that overlooks that to say, do ratepayers need to pay for this, won't be able to do it. That is the analogy I would use, because that's what's happening. And I think that's what the concern is that the PUC won't be able to look at it on the back end and deem it prudent, especially if there have been things you've done that haven't been prudent before.
Well, thank you for the question. I would just say that the upfront view actually provides customers with far greater certainty in that if we are at risk for any cost that we would therefore exceed. And I think just a broader perspective on this is prudency is always a difficult concept. There's some subjectivity involved in that, which is likely why commissions don't often do that. But when we're talking about a very significant investment of potentially, in excess of $1 billion, investors are certainly concerned about those kind of risks. And but that said, we're much more comfortable managing to a budget as opposed to dealing with some of the regulatory risks that might be involved. So I hope that helps.
Representative McQuinn? Representative Metza, then Baker.
To be brief, I'll take away my question.
All right, Representative Baker.
I think I can, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I can be brief on this as well, because I'm trying to still get back to what caused us to get here with this question. It sounds like over the years, you have normally not asked for the advanced determination of prudence. Normally, you do it and you try to get reimbursed. What I think happened in this case, or recently, was when you didn't get your rate of return from something that came up in Monticello. Is that a fair statement, Mr. Krug?
Representative, thank you. That certainly was a factor, and but I would just say general trends in the nuclear industry, some of the risks that utilities have seen around the country. And not to cast any, just in going back to that particular Monticello example, not to suggest in any way that that was, that was an inappropriate decision or anything like that. We certainly respect the Commission's authority. But when you step back and understand some of the risks going into this, and again, that prudency is a difficult thing to define. It's simply a matter of better understanding what risks we are going to manage and live with, and which ones that we're not. And so I think it's really that straightforward.
Representative Baker?
And thank you, Mr. Chair. And that's a great answer. With what happened at Fukushima. Thank you. It's been a long time. What happened there was, it woke us all up. I mean, it was a big deal. And I would hope that our system would allow the changes that took place for us to do the changes along the process to give you that recovery that was not expected at the beginning. And I think for me, as I see us really talking about this very complex issue, I'm a friend of nuclear. I think it's a great product, and I want to see it continue actually longer if we can past the license date. I'm still a little sore of us closing the biomass plant in Benson. And what I see happening here is a very good conversation that we should have had a year ago, talking about what are the options there and how can we get that plant to the end of its useful life too. And so I see, Representative O'Neill's fighting for her jobs in her town. And that's what I need to do in Benson more than I wish we would have had, again, more of this in-depth conversation. I know they're different, but they're sort of similar. You have to watch out for the investment of the shareholders and the rates that your customers are paying, and that's why we're having this tornado of a conversation, because we can see both sides of it. But I also see where the chamber is struggling because, again, there's no risk now for Xcel investors. Very little risk if you get sort of the thumbs up in advance, when normally the cost would be then you don't get the return on your investment if you don't get complete compensation. So it's a tough one. I'm glad you brought it to the table, Mr. Chair, and I just know that we need to do a better job being transparent about these kind of conversations before it starts getting closer to the end of the license and we're all of a sudden shutting down plants. Again, I'm a little sore from Benson. Thank you.
Representative Clark?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's good to see you there. This is a question for the author, I believe. I stepped out of the room just briefly, but there was, a lot of testimony from the one nuclear power plant at Monticello, but I didn't, and the people, the host community there, but I didn't hear, and if I missed it, I didn't hear testimony from the host community of Prairie Island. And so one of the questions I would have with you, and you and I have talked about this issue before, and I think there may be a way to fix it in this bill, but the tribal community in Prairie Island is certainly the host community who has a lot at risk. And we were just talking about Fukushima. I mean, that just brings it up again. And there have been studies and concerns raised. And I know in one of the previous bills you had, we did add the tribal community to the bill so that they had a voice. And so I was looking at line 2.14 where you have the various lists and you say, and other interested parties. And so I would like to ask you whether or not you'd be willing to insert in there the tribal community at Prairie Island. I think that's certainly an important party, sovereign nation, and appropriate, their voice would be appropriate to be included here. And so we haven't had a chance to talk about this before, but I just noticed that. So maybe you could talk to me about whether or not you've had any contact with them with this bill and whether or not you'd be open to that verbal amendment.
Representative O'Neill?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Representative Clark. So we did have the Red Wing City Council, the administrator, the business administrator come on behalf of the Red Wing City. But the tribal community did not come in to testify. And when I read the interested parties, that was what I was thinking is the Monticello community and the Prairie Island community. And we can certainly add it in specifically, but I believe that's what the intent of what other interested parties was. Certainly the host communities are incredibly interested parties. And they do, they're a part of the conversation now. They can present their testimony to the PUC. So, I would, that would be a friendly amendment to me because that certainly was my intent as I looked through this myself.
So, Mr. Chairman, if we'd be willing, would you be willing if we could take care of that right now? And then it would be in there and be done.
Representative O'Neill?
Representative Garofalo, Chair Garofalo, did you want to say something?
I believe Representative Clark was looking for a response from you on that.
She was deferring to me.
Oh, I'm sorry?
Yeah, so, Mr. Chairman, Representative O'Neill, I think that's something that can be discussed, but we don't want to do an amendment on the fly right now. We have a 24-hour rule in this committee, so, but I think it sounds like the author of the bill and Representative Clark have the same like mind. That's something that can be worked out later.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, right, that it's really up to the chair's discretion whether or not he would accept, but we can work on this
I'm fine
and
with
it'll
that.
come up again. We'll, if this is included in the omnibus bill, then we can have that conversation again, but I am definitely open to that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Representative Barr?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't exactly have a specific question. I've waffled back and forth on this a couple of times, and usually when I have a problem deciding on something, I got to take a step back and take a little bigger look at this. And where I'm having my problem is investor-owned utility coming to the government hat in hand, deciding what product they can put on the market for sale to private individuals, and then asking the government how much they can profit or how much they can charge. And it's the whole free market thing. There has never been a better mechanism for keeping prices low and things efficient, clean, to the point, just a finely tuned process. If there's a way to carve some money out of the process to make it cheaper for consumers, the free market is the way that has always happened best in the past. And that's where my conundrum comes in. We have supposedly free, an investor-owned or a privately owned company asking for some certainty, and there is no certainty in the free market. So no matter which way I look at this, I just have a problem with the whole we're coming to the government to ask how much we can charge, and I know that's not a purview of this bill is not covered any way of this, but I would really like to see us move to a more free market energy delivery system.
So we got Vogel, Thiessen, Munson, then we're done. Representative Vogel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And somewhat to that comment, and also the comments before, especially on the sliding scale, I do believe that nuclear is a good alternative for baseload, and we need a balanced system. So I'd like to see us come away from here with something. And I can understand the strategic need for looking out a lot farther than we might with some other less costly things. But I also see an inherent conflict, and that was maybe just addressed there. And I don't use inherent conflict as a bad thing, it's just exists as process. And because the return on investment, return on equity is dependent on how many assets are there. And I don't see a natural reason then for investor-owned utility to try to minimize the size of assets because the investors get more, the return is guaranteed basically. So if we're looking at that and we're in this monopolistic regulated environment with the political atmosphere, my question is, have you given thought to putting something with this bill that might bring us more toward that natural economic condition, you know, where you'd have a true economic condition where indeed the shareholders would share the risk and have some market discipline? Do you have any ideas on how that could maybe be structured into this? Because I realize the situation itself doesn't lend itself to it, but we're looking at a different process. Is there a way to bring some of that natural discipline in here that doesn't exist because it's a monopoly that's regulated in that political environment?
Mr. Krug.
Representative, thank you for the question. First of all, I would just emphasize that while we would be reducing regulatory risk in some manner, actually our financial risk would increase, and we're comfortable with that, meaning we would need to live with a cap. And I think that's something somewhat similar to what you might experience in the free market, meaning someone bids on a service, offering a service, and they have to live within those means. And so we certainly are trying to do that. Towards the broader question about having to introduce market mechanisms, that certainly is a difficult challenge, given that we also have an obligation to serve. And so that's, in a sense, why regulation was implemented and created in this state, is to kind of address that issue. We have a monopoly franchise, but at the same time, we do have an obligation to serve, and obviously we want to serve that cost effectively. So not quite sure how to answer that question. The sliding scale is yet another attempt to introduce a competitive element and provide us the appropriate incentives.
Representative Vogel.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And just a follow-up. I do question whether this is going to go anywhere because or how far it's going to go, just because of all the questions that have come up. And that's why I guess my suggestion is can we be creative here? Can we somehow come up with a creative way to put in some market discipline? Because right now, from what I see, is there isn't a reason to look at keeping that asset base down. And if I was estimating the cost of these improvements or a new plant, I would always tend to be toward the high end. Because even if you put in your sliding scale mechanism, it's still going to behoove you to be a little bit higher than a little bit lower when you propose the initial thing. So it's a suggestion, and I know the hour is late, but I do think that if we can be more creative, that maybe this thing has a little more legs as far as being realistic to get done.
Representative Thiessen, and then Munson.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chair. And waiting to the end is good because it drops a lot of my questions off. But I first just want to say how I think all the testifiers did a pretty fabulous job tonight, and we're pretty lucky to get this kind of education on these issues. So thank you to all of you. And I don't think we appreciate that often enough. So I had a question first on the resource plan. How often do we do resource plans?
Mr. Krug.
Representative, generally every 2 years, we are required to file a resource plan. Our next filing is February of 2019. On occasion, those get extended based on how long the process takes and how much analysis is required.
Representative Thiessen.
So I guess my question is, you do the resource plan and you put this budget in place, and then you come in 2 years later. Do you do the same process for the next resource plan and then the next resource plan 2 years after that?
Mr. Krug.
So you said, does the budget change each 2 years, I guess is the question.
Mr. Krug.
Well, in general, there's decisions to be made as the commission in this case indicated that this coming resource plan would be a very important one for making decisions about the future of our baseload facilities. So obviously, Prairie Island and Monticello, our nuclear facilities are in that mix. And so once the commission makes decisions about the go forward on a particular resource, so we'll start, and let's assume they want us to move forward with those resources, we'll start making investments fairly soon. And so unless there was some dramatic change in those costs or some changed circumstance, we wouldn't expect to have to revisit those decisions every 2 years. Generally, we would start the investments going, and that's on the resource planning side. On the cost recovery side, of course, if there are changes in our costs, significant changes, we certainly could propose those as changes to our budgets. But again, the commission may or may not decide to expand that budget at that time. They could certainly decline.
Representative Thiessen.
Thanks. So I guess so when you come in 2019 with this budget, is this a budget that's going to look out to 12 years? And if that's the case, what then happens in 6 years when you come in with your third? Presumably over 6 years, things could change substantially, and maybe you do get a new budget. How do those two pieces fit together? I guess that's what I'm kind of unclear about.
So
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you. There's two pieces to the puzzle. The one is the resource plan, which the commission will be making decisions on the 2019. At the same time, and I believe the legislation permits us to file this ADP at the same time, there would be a budget. Those two would obviously have to match, but the budget in the ADP would be a very detailed budget that would describe our expenses on an annual basis. If
Mr.
that
Krug,
would
explain what an ADP is.
An ADP is an advanced determination of prudency.
Thank you.
Which is envisioned in this bill we're currently proposing. Let's say that budget changed 2 years from now, 2 years from 2019. We certainly could propose changes to that more detailed budget. And again, the commission could decide to either accept or reject those changes. That would be for cost recovery purposes. For resource planning, whether or not they chose to accept those changes, their decision regarding the future operation of the facility has not changed. They've simply decided at that time not to offer advanced determination of prudency on those additional expenses. So I know it sometimes is a difficult concept, but there are two things happening. One is decisions about the future operation of the facility. That's occurring in the resource plan. And then decisions about when to provide regulatory certainty or not regarding the cost recovery for the facility. So those are really two separate things.
Representative Thiessen.
I guess maybe as it's boiling down, my question is, how long is this budget going to, how many years of budget are you trying to get approved in this ADP?
Potentially, we could propose a budget as long as the facility license, which would be, as we described, 2030 and 33 and 34 for Prairie Island. It wouldn't have to be that long. We wouldn't go quite that far out for that more detailed budget, simply because that's often difficult to do.
Representative Thiessen.
So two more questions. If you weren't to do this, would there be a certificate of need process here?
Mr. Krug.
We've already received a certificate of need for Prairie Island, and so there is already a high-level budget for that, not the detailed budget that we're talking about here.
Representative.
And I was just thinking that, not to get back to Monticello, but if the issue was high level versus detailed, you could probably do that through a certificate of need process too, or similar. But the last question I just would have, so when you make these operational improvements, or these investments, are those investments, I guess the question is, when you put that together, and maybe this is part of the process, are you making operational investments and capital investments that would not necessarily pay off in 12 years? And so could you include an investment that would actually, a capital investment that would actually significantly make it more likely that you'd be able to extend the life of the plant in a sense? And so,
Mr. Krug.
Representative, thank you for, it's a good question. In general, our investments have to match the length of time that the commission orders or permits the plant to remain open. Anything beyond that, obviously, it would be difficult to justify that without having more certainty around the length, the life of the facility.
Representative Munson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to thank everybody also for testifying, and thanking Representative O'Neill for carrying this bill and for making the changes last week. That was helpful to at least to gain my support on the bill. I also want to thank Representative Rarick for his comments earlier. I think he crossed off a lot of my comments that I wanted to make, and Representative Anderson as well, for talking about the nuclear being also carbon-free. We don't grow windmill blades in cornfields. To me, this really isn't about nuclear power, but this is really restoring the public's trust in government. I think that a lot of people in different industries are really fed up with regulators making decisions that can be really wishy-washy, and it's nice to have be able to. I mean, this is about a company mitigating their political risk of unelected bureaucrats making rules that impact their business and really impact the costs. On the way in here, and we saw the character talking about a blank check for Excel. In my mind, this is. We obviously talked about this not creating a blank check for Excel because the bill was changed, but under the current environment, this is really a blank invoice that we're giving customers. We're giving people an invoice that gets where we allow Excel to do whatever they want and pile that into the bill later. This is really about mitigating risk and having Excel determine what the costs are going to be beforehand, and everybody coming to an agreement on what it's going to cost and how it impacts ratepayers. So I don't understand how this is so controversial, other than that it has to do with nuclear power. But this is about business wanting to mitigate risk, and I think we should all get behind that, because I think that's how we can lower costs for this industry. So no questions, just my comment. And if you're taking a roll call, I'm in.
Okay, well, we're not. So Representative O'Neill, any closing comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for bringing this forward and having a very robust discussion. And I think we're going to continue the discussions as we leave here, and the Chamber and Excel and a couple other players will continue to have these conversations. And there may be, if this gets into the omnibus bill, Mr. Chair, then there may be another amendment to bring more peace in the valley. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Representative O'Neill. Just a couple of closing comments. I'm really proud of the members' committee, the committee's involvement in this. I know it was a long discussion, but I think it's worthwhile. It's an important issue. On a serious note, I don't know who showed up with the Monopoly dude. I'm all in favor of showmanship and everything. Don't do that again. If this issue comes up again and I see you here, I'm going to find out who paid for this, and you're going to pay for it. Don't do that. This is too serious an issue to screw around with. Besides that, chair's going to be at Mancini's after this. If you members of both parties are invited. If you want to get your last chance to get your provisions into the omnibus bill, or if you're in the government affairs community, everyone's invited. So with that completes our agenda for the day, and we're adjourned.